Hello and welcome to Biblical Theology Today. I want to talk about a question that I often get about the early chapters of Genesis, and that is, why are there two accounts of creation? Why do you have the material in chapter 1 and then seemingly a retelling of that material emphasizing slightly different details and perhaps even in a little different order in chapter 2? I had a student ask me that the other day, and I didn't really have time to go into a detailed answer, so I wanted to make a short video today and kind of walk through some of the ideas. In the link below, I'll try to link some other really good discussions available on YouTube, but these are my thoughts in terms of biblical theology and how biblical theology may help us with that question. If we went to the wider academic world, the answer given to that question is one all about sources, sources for the Pentateuch. And common view, JEDP, is that different sources were incorporated in the Pentateuch, and that's why you have doublets in many stories, and then that's why you have two accounts in the early chapters. And this is Logos Bible software and their Anderson Forbes analyzed text, and there's a filter. I've had it for years. I don't know really where I got it from, but it outlines the sources according to a very common approach, Eisfeld's approach. And in this, the P source is in blue, and you can see that nearly everything in chapter 1 is assigned to that source, all the way down through chapter 2, verse 4b. And then we go to this Yahwist poetry source, and then we get the J text going back and forth there, and then mainly the J source for the material in creation. So the idea is the reason why there are two accounts is originally there were two sources. And that theory is a prominent one, and it held sway for many years. When I began my PhD training, people had moved away from that source, but that suggestion, at least it wasn't as prominent in the days when I was coming up. And I think probably because it would be very difficult to come to a text, even in English, and to go through and say, okay, translator A did this part, and then the editor of that part of the committee did this word. It just becomes very difficult with any kind of precision to say, oh, I can understand this language well enough where I can see beyond maybe the editorial blunders of the person who was responsible for this text. That would be very difficult to do in English, and many people think that they have the ability to do that in Hebrew, and it's not been my experience that Old Testament scholars get to the place where they can volume read, as well as we can volume read English, and to try to do in English something that would be very difficult. I mean, if you're an author and you've written a book and I'm not even sure I could do that, where say, oh no, this sentence really was the editor's sentence and this sentence is my sentence. It would be very difficult to do that in English, and somehow with a language where you can spend a lifetime and not feel like you get to the place of utter fluency. That's probably a reason why not everyone seems to embrace this today. But we have this resource, and this is one suggestion. I'm not persuaded by that view. I think Reverend Childs is probably right that at the end of the day we have to deal with the text that we have, and speculation about how the text got to us perhaps is interesting to us, but at the end of the day it is a text, and we have to deal with the text as it appears. And when we do that, we're still faced with the question, well, why do you have two accounts? And in this debate, you have a particularly thorny, if you'll pardon the pun, problem, because when we come to the description in 2:4, and I hope this doesn't give you a headache. Sometimes it gives me a headache to scroll through. When you get to 2:4, you have this statement, these are the Toledoth of the heavens and the earth, on the day when the Lord God created, on the day the Lord God caused them to be created. And then right off the bat, it says in every siach. And you can see, we've got this word here. I can pull up the auto info window, and maybe I'll just get out of the way here. You can see that this word bush, there's a little bit of a debate what it means. Is this a noxious plant? Is it all plants? You can see that the word in the Septuagint is just green stuff. So is it all plants? Is it plants of the field, like cultivated plants? Something like that. And then you have this statement, before they sprang up, for God had not yet reigned upon the earth. And so there's this debate. Is this talking about a prejudged situation, or this is talking about all plants, or is it talking about just the Garden of Eden? And scholars go back and forth. By the end of the text, when we get to the fall, and it talks about there is no man to work the ground, clearly working the ground is part of the judgment. And so right off the bat, in verse 5, you have a little bit of a problem in terms of how we need to interpret it. And in 2:4, with this Ella Toledoth, and I think I have maybe a handout of this, and I'll make myself disappear again. You have this interesting feature. These are the Toledoth of the heavens and the earth: Adam, Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Shem, the chosen one. Some debate, are there, do you count this twice? Are there 10? Are there 11? Well, if you're dealing with a whole Bible biblical theology, maybe you would say something like there are 14 all total, 13 in the Old Testament and then 1 in the New. And, it doesn't help us that we're dealing with 3 different languages in the Bible, but when we try to bridge that gap, it's clear that this Ella Toledoth is a formula in the Old Testament. When you look at how the Septuagint deals with it, it's clear that the translators are trying to connect some of these passages. Exactly how they're doing it, I'm not sure, but they're trying to make the Sefer Toledoth or the Sefer Toledoth somehow equate. And it's interesting to me that Delitzsch, in his New Testament translation into Hebrew, he actually picks that up, and he tries to show us that there's some kind of connection there between all of these Toledoths. What we do with that, and you can see that Matthew, like, he's obviously connecting it somehow, but he doesn't say this is the Toledoth. So it's kind of teasingly similar, but not exact. And it seems to me that all that would be important for us to think about when we come to this text and when we try to interpret it. Here's what I wonder about the text. You've got this story, Genesis 1:1 to 2:4a. But then we have a question. Does 2:4a go with what went before, or does 2:4a or 2:4b, however you want to call it, does that start the second section? Well, when we, look at the Toledoth in the rest of the Bible, it seems to me that the way they work is you have the introduction of something about the person or the thing in the previous section, and then it kind of tells you how it played out over time. And the interesting one here, the Toledoth of Jacob, you would think would be all about Jacob's life, but it doesn't. It starts telling us about Joseph. And so you have Esau discussed, and then the Edomites, his offspring, discussed. It's interesting the names that aren't in these Toledoths. You don't have Abraham's name, and you don't have David's name in any of the Toledoths. So I wonder if you were taking a Christocentric approach, and when you get to the New Testament, this is the Toledoth of Yeshua HaMashiach, the son of David, the son of Abraham, the two very names that are omitted, and then all that about 14 generations. And we probably talked elsewhere on this channel about David, and the gematria, his name is associated with the term 14. And so I wonder if we took a Christocentric approach to these two stories, if it might be that this is somehow the outline of the universe being created as God's temple. Plan A, if you will. Plan A was always Jesus coming and redeeming, becoming one flesh with his bride, being fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it. And then that overall plan A isn't what governs the actual stories of how it plays out over time. In other words, Jesus and the church and the redemption and Jesus' death was always plan A in God's mind. But God knew, it's kind of Augustine's fortunate view of the fall. He knew that before that plan was implemented in history, that you would have the actual fall of Adam and Eve, the loss of the garden, and then the story of Jesus buying things back. It does seem to me, and that's an idea. I'm just thinking about it. I haven't really done a history of interpretation to see if there are other people who have that idea, but you've got, if you think of it in Plato's terms, you've got the forms, and then how the actual individual expressions of the forms play out. It is interesting to me that the first 3 chapters in Genesis parallel the last 3 chapters of Revelation. You have a cosmic power couple who fails in Genesis 2 and 3, and then you have this cosmic power couple of Christ and the church who never fail at anything. You have a symmetry between Eden lost and Eden restored, and you've got the tree of life and the river of life. And so it seems to me, when you step back and look at the text that we have, that there is this idea of you've got this real thing in heaven, just like God said to Moses, make the earthly temple just like the one you saw in heaven. But then you've got this actual temple on earth. So the actual temple on earth is not the one in heaven, but it is the one that is built by God's design. And you get glimpses of the heavenly one, perhaps in Ezekiel, God's chariot throne, and then the temple, huge temple being built. And then when you come to the New Testament with Ezekiel 2.0, the book of Revelation, you have this same thing where you have apostate, God's apostate people giving way to this glorious, redeemed New Jerusalem, this virgin bride coming down out of heaven from God. And so I wonder if that idea of the earthly copy and the heavenly reality, I wonder if that could come into play with these 2 stories of creation, and that rather than being some kind of editorial blunder, that it's actually intended by God and part of his artistry to present this plan A that presupposes what will happen in the future. And of course, many church fathers believe that the days somehow foreshadow church history or something like that. I'm not sure I buy that, but the idea that somehow it might point beyond itself to the ultimate consummation, I think there might be merit to that. And of course, you have this whole thing about the abyss. The Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. I think it's pretty standard idea that this part of creation is mimicking the redemption, of Israel at the Red Sea and the waters of the deep. Well, what do we know about this abyss? Well, we know that the demons are terrified of it. In Luke, they beg Jesus not to send them to the abyss. And of course, abyss in Revelation is this place where ultimately Satan and his followers will be cast into the abyss. And so, I don't know, is it a possibility that the 2 accounts of creation are intended by God to point beyond themselves to kind of the ultimate reality of creation, the kind of the plan A heavenly one, Genesis 1, 1-2, 3, and then how that plan starts in 2, 4 and following with the fall And God knowing the end from the beginning, God knowing that that's how it played out, that the man from dust and his wife Eve were never going to be the ones who brought the people of God into the land flowing with milk and honey, that it would take the God-man, the man from heaven, humbling himself by taking the form of man, everything that makes man man, and then in the unity of his person, more than obeying what God required and doing it in a way that ultimately will allow all those who ever come to him to live with God in heavenly Jerusalem. I don't know, just a thought. I would be interested in your take. And as always, I will see you next time.